So, first off, I want to give a shout out to a couple people that gave me some tips and reminded me that certain sets exist that need to be talked about in the Basehead IEM conversation. First off, Mr. Jabinho for reminding me that the QKZ HBB exists because it definitely deserves to be in this conversation. Second off, Hijinks87 for giving me the tip to use wide bore tips on the Legato. I have tested it, and I will get into that later. And Codex Necrogeddon for reminding me that I may need to use a higher gain output on my DAC, which I'll go ahead and talk about is the BTR5 2021 edition. I retested the Legato using the 2.5 and balanced cable. And I suppose I should just get into that. And essentially, my view is unchanged, but I've given this set as much of a boost as I can. And the sad truth is, it's just not my cup of tea. I'm not saying this set is bad necessarily. This set does lend itself well to a library from the 70s and 80s, and even into the 90s. But just giving this thing a chance was not really the problem. This is for a certain individual. That individual is not me, but I gave this a chance with the widest bore tips that I've got and a balanced cable. I used this on the highest gain settings. It did not make a difference to how I perceived the sound. And I will acknowledge that I listened to Tupac's album All Eyes on Me, and also AC/DC's album Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. And these are two albums that, I mean, I'm 29. I'm not super young or anything like that, not super old. Some people may call that old. But I was around when these albums were, still being played. And I mean, they are still being played today. But my sister bumped Tupac, and my father bumped AC/DC and Metallica. And these do sound similar to riding in the back of my sister's car and her bumping her sub. These do invoke that. Along with my father, playing AC/DC in his garage on his big, tower set speakers. These harken back to those days, but this set doesn't lack in tuning. The tuning is not the problem. For me, it's the presentation that just differs from my wants and intents. I'm looking for something so that I can critically listen to music to, listen and hear all the fine details clearly. These are a set that are meant to evoke emotion, to transport you back to a time that you once loved. And that's a very noble goal for a set. It just misses the mark with me. So, the QKZ HBB, a set that I had forgotten about in talking about Basehead sets, but a set that is absolutely a worthy pick to be in that conversation. It has more impact in the felt hammers hitting strings in Aphex Twin's Avril 14th. You can hear on certain IEMs they have just an impact is all I can. You feel it, and it's not necessarily a low bassy, sound or frequency really, but you can feel it with these on the TRN ST1 Pros, which we've got right here. It you could still feel the impact, but it was lesser so than the HBB QKZs. And another set that I would like to bring into this conversation is the FloAudio Calla. These are all generally in the same area of price. I will put the prices on screen. And these, depending on what you get them on sale, these are all definitely in the Basehead budget battle. It's something that I kind of overlooked with these two sets. Not because they aren't good sets, but just because they were sets that came out a little while ago, and I had honestly just forgot were in my collection. I found that the QKZ HBB has a wider soundstage than these two. I'd say I'd rank this one as top, then the ST1 Pro as second, then the Calla as third. But these really do kind of just tie with each other. It's a pretty large margin between these two, but we'll get into a little bit more nuance. So the FloAudio has some aspects that when you're listening to hi-hats, it leads me to believe that these are either a higher treble frequency or either there's a higher frequency range. I'm not sure, but these hi-hats stand out a little more, and there are some micro details that I guess are up on the higher frequency range that stand out more on these. A big no-no for these, and why I couldn't really... These are good. By all means, if you like a heavy V shape, these go very well into the higher range, and they still do have good low range. So I'd say these are good, but there is noticeable driver flex. When you put these in your ears, you will absolutely hear that driver flex. They're comfortable, though. They are comfortable, but time will tell if that driver flex will actually damage or have an impact to the sound. So that's to be seen. Now, the TR1 Pro has the most pleasing bass in the ABC comparison. And the reason I say that is because of a track by Azari called Nightmare, where all three of these had a pleasing sub-bass pulse at the start, but at the 17-second mark, there's a switch from sub-bass to still, a low grumble, that there's so much more impact. Now, that's not to say that the HBB lacks. So, using another track by Author and Punisher called Beginning of the End, the QKZ HBB steadily ramped up in pressure with this frequency sweep. The song starts with a low, just very low frequency sweep that goes all the way up to about the minute 15, minute 20-second mark. And this throughout is very intense, and you feel the pressure building. Now with the ST1 Pro, that pressure actually stopped building around maybe the 50 to 54 second mark, whereas it continued up to the minute and 15, minute 20 second mark with the HBB. Now, the Calla, it was a little uneven throughout the sweep. It felt like it wasn't gaining in pressure like the rest of these, and it didn't really feel all that intense. So I'm not a expert. All I can tell you is what I experienced. Whereas these had uneven gain in pressure and intensity, these two were constant, and the HBB continued to build even after the ST1 Pro faltered out around the 54 or so second mark. But that, along with the felt hammer impact from Avril 14th, really makes me believe that there is just an elevated midsection on the HBB that it just may make it more desirable for mid-centric music, possibly rock music. I'm not exactly. It doesn't really suit my library. That comes down to the ST1 Pro fitting my library. Neither of these are low detail, really, but the versatility with this set, the ST1 Pro, having the extra bass and the balanced version, you can essentially tune this by putting it back down to the balanced version and get a little more clarity, less. This is Basehead all the way. There's no really, unless you EQ, there's no changing this. With this, you can have a Basehead set and a decently balanced set. So overall, I'm still going to give it to the ST1 Pro, but the the QKZ HBB, these definitely deserve to be in, and it's really just a tie for these two. You get a little more mid-centric with this, and you get possibly a more intense full frequency from the HBB set. But as far as versatility, the ST1 Pro takes it. The Calla, while still a good Basehead set, and they frequently run some nice sales, FloAudio does, and they come with these. I'm not sure if this was the default set or the default cable, or if it was one of their bonus add-ons, but they frequently have sales, and this is a very nice quality cable. It feels very, very nice. It has some memory to it. But if I was going to buy for myself, the cable quality on the ST1 Pro is better. It's not this generic, you've seen it a million time cable. It has a changeable termination. I would go for the ST1 Pro just for its versatility and its included. The tips, these, oh man. TRN's T-tips, they are a spring tip clone in my closest approximation. Whereas the HBBs, they come with just your standard tips. I have T-tips on here just to give them a good seal for me. But the cable, the tip selection, it's not really there for me. One last song that I wanted to talk about, which makes these HBBs shine for the soundstage, is a track called HDMI by Bones. It absolutely elevates this set. So I talked about that larger soundstage. In this song, there's a lot of reverb. And, these may be, it's so hard to say. You just have to have your priorities. If you want a great soundstage, roomy, if the song takes advantage of the soundstage, these absolutely kill it. Listening to the track HDMI by Bones, it was roomy and expansive on these, whereas with these two sets, lesser so. You really got a great feel for the song with the QKZ HBBs, whereas on the TRN ST1 Pros and the FloAudio Callas, it was lacking. So there's not a real clear. I guess I could kind of take the FloAudio out of the conversation, just because it doesn't do anything that these two don't do. And I can't say a clear winner between these two. It really just depends on your priorities. Do you want a larger soundstage and a better mid presence? Then go with the QKZ HBBs. If you want a more versatile and bang for your buck with the better cable, the option for changing your terminations, then go with the TRN ST1 Pros. Neither of these are a bad set. I would highly recommend either of them for the reasons that I have outlined here. And honestly, both of them are a definite buy. I would highly recommend them to just depending on your priorities and music library, pick the one that fits you best. And that's it. Have a good one.